Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The phone on his desk did not ring. It vibrated. A low, insistent hum against the polished mahogany. A tremor in the otherwise perfect stillness of his office. Dr. Marcus Thorne, at 61 years of age, had built a life predicated on the elimination of such tremors. In his world, the sterile, high-stakes theater of cardiothoracic surgery precision was everything. A stray vibration, an unplanned movement, could mean the difference between a steady beat and a flat line. This was the third vibration in 5 minutes. He glanced at the screen. A single name. Finch. The private detective he had retained 3 days prior. The message was as blunt and efficient as the man himself. We need to talk. Urgent, not over the phone. Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a clinical symptom he recognized. It was the same pressure he felt just before stepping into a waiting room to inform a family that the procedure had not been successful. He knew that tone. He had used it himself. It was the tone of irreversible news. They arranged to meet in 1 hour. A small cafe in the city's old quarter, far from the hospital, far from the manicured lawns of their neighborhood, far from anywhere he might be recognized. As he drove, the city blurring past the windows of his sedan, his mind, disciplined and orderly, began to collate the data of his own life. 35 years of marriage. He had provided, that was the verb he always returned to. He had provided Evelyn with a beautiful home, with financial security that was absolute. He had provided her the freedom to pursue her hobbies, the charity boards, the garden club, the Pilates studio. She ran more for social connection than for income. Evelyn, 56 years old, had not had to worry about a single bill since the day their son, Leo, was born. He had worked double shifts in his residency, endless nights on call, weekends sacrificed to the demanding god of the operating room. He had done it all to build this life, this fortress for his family. He remembered her complaints, scattered over the decades like fallen leaves. "You're never here, Marcus. We never talk anymore." He had always considered them the necessary, regrettable cost of the comfort he provided. He'd seen her life as a masterpiece of his own creation, and her role was simply to live in it. Happily, the investigation wasn't for him. Of course not. It was for Leo, his son. Marcus had sensed a distance in Leo's marriage to Sophia, had seen a shadow in his son's eyes. He suspected Sophia was being unfaithful. He was a diagnostician, after all. He recognized symptoms. Hiring Finch was a protective measure, a father's duty. But now, as he pulled into a parking spot on a cobblestone street, a deeper, colder truth settled in his gut. Perhaps the tremor he was trying to diagnose wasn't in his son's house. Perhaps it was in his own. The cafe smelled of dark roast coffee and old wood. The afternoon light was soft, cutting lazy golden rectangles onto the floor. It was a place for quiet conversations, for secrets. Marcus sat at a small table in the corner, his back to the wall. A surgeon's habit. Always know your exits. Always see the entire room. Mr. Finch arrived precisely on time, a man whose movements were as economical as his words. He carried a brown leather portfolio under his arm. His expression was one Marcus knew intimately from his decades in medicine. It was the look of a professional who must deliver a terrible, objective truth and feels a flicker of human discomfort in doing so. "Dr. Thorne." Finch nodded, sliding into the opposite chair. He didn't order anything. "Mr. Finch." Finch got straight to the point. "We have a complicated situation here. Very complicated." "Oh?" He opened the portfolio and began to pull out photographs, laying them on the table with the care of a prosecutor arranging evidence. And in a way, they were. "I followed Mrs. Sophia Thorne, as you asked." The first photos showed Sophia leaving her law office early in the afternoon. Then, her car parked outside a luxury condominium building on Sutton Terrace. Marcus nodded. Tense. He felt a grim satisfaction. His diagnosis was correct. 20 minutes later, Finch continued, his voice a low monotone. Someone else arrived and entered the same building. He paused and looked Marcus directly in the eye. A professional courtesy. The moment before the incision. "Sir, it was your wife, Mrs. Evelyn Thorne." The world didn't spin. It simply stopped. The quiet chatter of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, it all faded into a dull, distant hum. Marcus picked up the photos. His hands felt like they belonged to someone else, clumsy and disconnected. There she was, Evelyn, wearing the green dress he'd bought her for their anniversary. The date and time were stamped in the corner of the image. Finch's voice pulled him back. I thought it might be a coincidence, a scheduled meeting of some kind. But 3 hours later, they came out together, laughing. The next photos showed them in the parking garage, saying goodbye like old friends sharing a secret. A perfect performance. Marcus's mind, his analytical, surgical mind, was trying to find a logical explanation, a differential diagnosis that made sense. But Finch wasn't finished. I decided to shift focus and follow your wife. She drove to a house in the Willow Creek neighborhood. A man was waiting for her at the door. The next photos were the ones that cut. They were devastating. Evelyn, his wife, embracing a man Marcus didn't recognize. A deep, familiar hug. Evelyn walking into the house with him. The clock showed she stayed for 2 hours before leaving, fixing her hair in the car with a small, satisfied smile he hadn't seen in years. His name is Richard Vance, Finch said, pulling out a final sheet of paper. 52, divorced, financial consultant. They met at an investment seminar 6 months ago. Marcus felt sick, a physical, visceral nausea. And here, Finch said, his voice dropping slightly, is what makes it complicated. He laid out more photos. Sophia, his daughter-in-law, with another man. A partner at her firm. Dominic. But here's the connection. Sophia introduced Richard to your wife at a charity function 4 months ago. They've been accomplices ever since. Accomplices. The word hung in the air. Sophia provides alibis for your mother. When your wife says she's at the spa with her daughter-in-law, or helping with a charity gala, she's with Richard. And your wife does the same for Sophia. When Sophia says she's visiting her mother-in-law, she's with Dominic. A pact. A system of lies, built right under his roof. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the weight of 35 years of marriage crashing down on him. He had hired a detective to protect his son, and in doing so, he had discovered his own life was a meticulously constructed fraud. Worse, the two women in his life were not just betraying their husbands. They were working together, covering for each other, probably laughing at the naive, hard-working men they came home to. The diagnosis was clear. The tissue was malignant, and the only course of action was excision. That evening, Marcus came home earlier than usual. The house was filled with the aroma of roasting salmon and rosemary. Evelyn was in the kitchen, wearing a white apron over her dress, softly humming a tune he didn't recognize. The scene was so perfectly domestic, so profoundly normal, that a wave of pure, cold anger rose in his chest. How could she do this? How could she stand here, in the kitchen he paid for, preparing a meal he liked, and pretend that they were a happy couple, while she was sleeping with another man 3 times a week? She turned when she heard him, and smiled. A brilliant, practiced smile. Marcus, honey, you're home early. I'm making that salmon you love. He didn't answer. He placed the brown leather portfolio on the granite countertop, right next to the cutting board where she was chopping asparagus. Evelyn, he said, we need to talk. Now. The tone of his voice made her smile falter. What is it? Did something happen at the hospital? He opened the folder. He began to pull out the photographs, laying them down one by one, like surgical instruments on a sterile tray. The first showed Evelyn entering the building on Sutton Terrace. The second showed her with Richard Vance at the front door of the house in Willow Creek. The third, more intimate, a discreetly filmed shot, showed the two of them kissing on his doorstep. He kept placing the photos. Methodically, without emotion. Her expression changed, as if a mask were being ripped from her face. First, shock, wide eyes, mouth slightly open, then panic, the color draining from her cheeks. And then, strangely, something that looked like relief, mixed with defiance. She dropped the knife with a clatter. She crossed her arms. You had me investigated. The indignation in her voice was so absurd it was almost comical. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. Is that really your primary concern? Not the fact that you've been sleeping with another man for 6 months, but that I found out? Evelyn flinched at the crude language. Marcus never spoke like that. I wasn't investigating you, Evelyn. I was investigating Sophia. I was worried about our son. I thought his wife might be cheating on him. And guess what? He paused for effect. She is. But the real surprise was discovering my own wife as her accomplice. That you two built some kind of club of lies. He tossed more photos onto the counter. Now they showed Sophia with Dominic. You thought you were so clever, didn't you? You cover for her. She covers for you. 2 marriages destroyed, but at least you have a friend to share your dirty little secrets with. Emil. She tried to speak, but Marcus raised his hand, a gesture that commanded silence in the operating room and commanded it here. No. You're going to listen to me first. 35 years, Evelyn. 35 damned years I spent building this life, this family. I worked shifts you can't even imagine to give you comfort, to give you security. You never had to work a day after Leo was born. You never had to worry about money. And this is how you repay me? By sleeping with some second-rate consultant while I was literally saving people's lives? She finally found her voice, and it was loaded with years of resentment he had chosen not to see. You're never here, Marcus. When was the last time we had a real dinner together without you being called away? When was the last time you even looked at me like I existed? He shook his head, dismissing her words as irrelevant data. So the solution was to cheat? Was that it? You felt lonely, so you decided you had the right to destroy our marriage? She stepped forward, her eyes glistening with a mixture of tears and anger. I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already dead. This marriage has been a corpse for a decade, Marcus. You just didn't notice because you were too busy, too important. Her voice broke. Richard. He makes me feel alive again. He sees me. Oh. Marcus felt her words like tiny, sharp cuts, but his own voice came out cold and controlled. He makes you feel alive. That's wonderful. But answer me this. Does Leo know his mother is a liar? That she turned his own wife into her partner in crime? Evelyn's face went white. You wouldn't. He cut her off, his voice like steel. I already did. I called Leo before I came home. He's on his way. He'll be here in about 20 minutes. He gestured to the photos on the counter. I showed him everything. The pictures of Sophia with that lawyer. He deserves to know his wife is cheating on him, and he deserves to know his own mother knew about it and helped her hide it. She brought a hand to her mouth, a strangled sob escaping her lips. My God, Marcus, you had no right. He exploded, his voice finally cracking its icy shell. I had no right. Are you serious? You slept with another man for months. You turned our daughter-in-law into your accomplice. You lied to my face every single day, and I had no right to tell our son the truth. The silence that followed was heavy, dense. Evelyn began to cry. Not the delicate tears she sometimes used to get her way, but deep, ugly sobs of utter devastation. The doorbell rang. Leo had arrived. Marcus went to answer the door, leaving Evelyn shattered in the kitchen. When Leo walked in, his face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. It was clear he had been crying on the drive over. Father and son embraced, a silent, powerful connection of shared pain, of shared betrayal. In that moment, Marcus felt a grim sense of victory. He had secured his ally. Evelyn appeared in the kitchen doorway, trying to compose herself. Leo, honey, I can explain. Now. Leo raised his hand, the same sharp, dismissive gesture his father had just used. He had inherited more than Marcus's looks. No, Mom. Dad already showed me everything. His voice trembled, but it was firm. The photos of you with that man. The photos of Sophia with her partner. And he told me about your scheme. Your scheme. He took a breath, the words catching in his throat. You knew my wife was cheating on me, and you didn't tell me. Worse, you helped her hide it. You're my mother. How could you? Evelyn tried to move toward him, her hands outstretched. It wasn't like that, Leo. Sophia was having a hard time. She confided in me. Leo cut her off, his voice laced with a bitterness that seemed to age him by a decade. Hard times? Do hard times justify this? And you, Mom? What hard times were you having that justified cheating on Dad for 6 months? He looked from his mother to his father, who remained silent, letting his son fight the battle for him. Dad was trying to protect me, Leo said, his voice cracking. He was investigating because he sensed something was wrong. And you were making a fool out of both of us. Evelyn tried one last, desperate gambit, turning her focus back to Marcus. Son, your father isn't perfect. He's never home. He always puts his work first. Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as a scalpel. Don't you dare try to shift the blame onto me in front of our son. Evelyn, I worked my entire life to give this family everything. You want to blame me for being a dedicated provider? Go ahead, but don't change the subject. The subject here is betrayal. It's lies. It's complicity. Leo looked between his parents, watching the world he had known his entire life disintegrate before his eyes. I have to go, he whispered. I need to go home and confront Sophia. Marcus placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. The evidence is in the folder. Everything you need. He paused. My lawyer, Stuart Brennan, can refer you to someone very good. Someone who will protect your interests. Leo nodded numbly. He picked up the heavy leather portfolio and walked to the front door without looking back, without saying goodbye to his mother. When the door clicked shut, the silence in the house was absolute. Marcus turned to Evelyn one last time. Her face was a ruin. You can stay here tonight, he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. Tomorrow morning, I want you out of this house. You can go to Richard's place, since he makes you feel so alive. You can go wherever you want. But not here. Marcus, please, she begged, her voice a raw whisper. Can't we? He shook his head. There is nothing to talk about. You made your choices. Now you will live with them. He walked to the phone on the kitchen wall. Oh, and one more thing. I called the Hamiltons this afternoon. Oh. The Hamiltons had been their closest friends for 25 years. I told them everything, Marcus continued, watching the last bit of hope die in her eyes. Showed them the proof. Margaret was especially shocked. I think she always admired you, always said our marriage was an example for everyone. Imagine her disappointment. Evelyn stared at him, horrified. You told our friends. Marcus smiled, but there was no humor in it. It was the dispassionate smile of a surgeon observing a successful procedure. I did, and I will tell others, too. I will not lie for you, Evelyn. I will not pretend our marriage ended over irreconcilable differences. People will know the truth. You destroyed this family, and everyone will know exactly how. She started screaming then, calling him cruel, vengeful, a monster. He simply walked upstairs, went into the guest room, and locked the door, leaving her to her solitary, useless rage in the ruins of the life they had built. The weeks that followed were not chaos. For Marcus, they were a series of controlled demolitions, executed with surgical precision. He documented the fallout in his mind as a physician might track a patient's progress post-op. Leo confronted Sophia that same night. The photos were undeniable. After a brief, futile attempt at denial, she confessed. Their divorce was swift and brutal. Marcus was pleased to note that Leo, guided by a lawyer from Stuart Brennan's firm, acted with a decisiveness he had not previously possessed. He had learned from his father. Betrayal, once diagnosed, required immediate and total removal. The consequences for the other men were equally efficient. Rumors of Dominic's affair with a junior partner's wife spread through Port Crest's tight-knit legal community. He was quietly and firmly encouraged to leave his firm within 3 months. His own marriage, predictably, collapsed. Richard Vance, the man who made Evelyn feel alive, reacted exactly as Marcus had predicted a man of his character would. Once the scandal became public, once his name was tied to the messy, public destruction of a prominent surgeon's family, he vanished. He stopped answering Evelyn's calls. He changed his number. Men like Richard, Marcus reasoned, enjoyed the thrill of a married woman because it was safe. A divorced, socially ruined, and financially needy woman was not part of the arrangement. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. Marcus's lawyer, Stuart, was a master. While the state was no fault, adultery still impacted alimony. Stuart argued, successfully, that Evelyn had used marital funds to sustain the affair. Joint credit cards for hotel rooms, gifts, dinners. Dissipation of marital assets, he called it. In the end, Marcus kept the family home. He kept the majority of his substantial investment portfolio and savings, wealth he had, in his own mind, solely accumulated. Evelyn received a smaller share, enough to live on, but a fraction of the lifestyle she had known. The judge awarded her a modest, temporary alimony for only 3 years, citing that at 56, she was perfectly capable of working. Marcus observed it all with a detached satisfaction. It was not revenge. It was justice. It was the logical, unavoidable outcome of her choices. He had simply facilitated the process. As he had engineered, the social fallout was contained entirely to Evelyn's side. He was the wrong party, the devoted husband and father, betrayed while he was busy holding human hearts in his hand. He received quiet nods of sympathy at the country club, supportive calls from friends. Margaret Hamilton, once Evelyn's closest confidant, now invited Marcus for dinner, alone. He had successfully excised the malignancy, and in doing so, he had saved the healthy tissue, his reputation, his finances, and his relationship with his son. The operation, from his perspective, had been a complete success. 2 years later, life had reshaped itself. Marcus stood in the garden of the house, the same house he had once shared with Evelyn. It was his now, entirely. The autumn air was crisp, and the leaves on the maple trees were turning a brilliant, fiery red. Leo was visiting. They were grilling steaks, drinking beer. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of shared betrayal, was closer than it had ever been. They played golf on Sundays. They talked about life, about rebuilding. "Dad showed me everything," Leo had said once, months after the divorce. "He was trying to protect me." Marcus held on to those words. They were his vindication. Leo, now living in a sleek downtown apartment, mentioned he'd started seeing someone, a curator from the city museum. "It's light," he said, swirling the beer in his bottle. "No pressure, but it's nice." Marcus smiled, a genuine, warm smile. He was happy for his son. Then Leo looked at him, his expression suddenly serious. "Do you think you'll ever, trust someone again, after everything?" Marcus considered the question, watching the smoke curl up from the grill. "I don't know if trust is the right word anymore, Leo. Trusting someone isn't about guarantees. It's about choosing to believe, knowing you might get hurt. Evelyn hurt me, she hurt you, but that doesn't mean every woman is Evelyn." He took a sip of his beer. "I've learned something more important. I've learned to trust myself. My own judgment." Leo nodded thoughtfully. "Do you ever regret it? Hiring Finch? Finding out?" Marcus shook his head immediately, without a flicker of hesitation. "Not for a second. The truth sets you free, Leo. It's a cliché because it's true. I could have spent the rest of my life living a lie, thinking I had a happy marriage while my wife was laughing behind my back. Now, at least I'm free. Free to rebuild. Free to be honest with myself." They clinked their bottles together in a comfortable silence. Father and son, survivors. He was a respected surgeon. He had started traveling, something he never had time for before. He went to Spain, to Argentina, places Evelyn had always wanted to see. He found a certain cold irony in that, and he didn't mind it. He thought of Evelyn occasionally. He had heard through the grapevine that she was living in a small apartment across town. Her Pilates studio had closed. She was giving private piano lessons again, returning to a life she'd abandoned 30 years ago. He felt nothing about this. It was merely data, the outcome of her choices. The story of what happened spread, not as malicious gossip, but as a cautionary tale told in quiet conversations in hospital lounges and country club bars. The story of the man who tried to protect his son and ended up saving himself. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn, Marcus looked at the house, at his son, at the life he now controlled completely. He had faced a catastrophic diagnosis and had not flinched. He had performed the necessary procedure with skill and precision. He had cut away the disease, cauterized the wound, and managed the recovery. The final entry in his mental record was clear. The surgery was a success. The marriage was dead, yes, but the patient, the one that mattered, had survived. He was free. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.